Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. Wait a few minutes for people to show up. Hello, Amanda.
Good morning. How are you guys?
All right.
Morning.
Morning.
Waiting for coffee.
Yeah. All right. Welcome to the meeting. I guess Jesse may be coming along momentarily. Maybe we'll get some other people in. We've had a lot of people joining the Slack, I think, for GSOC. Looks like they're interested in a number of different projects. So I don't know, what they, I got to come up with some better onboarding materials for that. Or actually, we do have onboarding materials, but I need to get them, out. So make people aware of them. Okay. So, yeah, we had a number of good meetings this week. Monday, we had DevoWorm. That was pretty good. Wednesday, we had our Cognition Futures meeting. It was also pretty good. So, yeah, and then we skipped Cybernetics this week. And we didn't have an open source meeting, but we'll be coming to that soon, that time where that becomes a thing. So, yeah. Any updates from people?
I guess, yeah, I agree. Wednesday's meetings have been going well. I've really enjoyed the paper we're reading, which is The Biology of Cognition from Maturana. It's from 1970. And it kind of feels both like outdated and like it would benefit from, recent developments in the relevant sciences, but it also feels very ahead of its time.
Right.
In the sense that it feels very like unified and like an interesting level of abstraction, and has some features that people I think are after when they talk about what cognitive science should be. So yeah, it's been interesting in that respect.
Great. Welcome, Sarka.
Yeah, I thought that the history of Chile and its relationship to the what was the name of the lab near Chicago?
Biological cybernetics, I guess.
Yeah,
or biological control, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. It was interesting to read. It was. I kept on. Well, I didn't finish it, but was afraid that it was going to get into the dark history of, basically Chicago's relationship to Chile, which is not good.
University of Chicago.
University of Chicago. That was great, and I love the reference, Amanda, the metabolism. I haven't gotten into it yet.
Oh yeah, that's wild. I don't know. I didn't know where to like sort that in my.
I have that problem with this one.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good problem to have.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, I've been backing up the Slack channels, and I've actually been moving some things, or actually mirroring some things to the Discord. So there's a computational psychiatry channel there, or a lot of that's mirrored. That's actually in the critical periods Discord. And then in the big unfinished ideas Discord, there's another channel that's getting,
As it relates to the Saffron Call, I really recommend the Ryan Smith talk at Active Inference Institute.
Oh, okay.
And I shouldn't say talk. It was ostensibly he was there. The students were presenting their work. he was talking. But just a great overview, and he's done that before in terms of he's got that. He's got a paper from a year or two ago, which is like overview of the mathematics behind dynamic causal modeling or something like that. And anyway, it was a great explanation of kind of where how active inference comes into the equations. And as he states, like, this isn't at this point, like, active inference doesn't mean one thing, and that it's good to understand, like, from an implementation standpoint, like how I think in their case it was like it's changing the reward function specifically in the kind of deep reinforcement learning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but anyway.
Right. I have to check that out.
I want to, yeah. I mean, yeah. It's definitely. I wanted to like print out the paper and be able to go through it while he's talking, or get it up on a big screen or something,
Yeah.
so you can see what he's doing. And the reason I mention him is that he's, as he also says, a lot of his examples are from his lab are computational psychiatry. So that is specifically what he's doing, which is great. And there's another guy there at the, I think it's called the Laureate Institute. It's there in Oklahoma, Tulsa.
Okay.
Wesley Thompson, I think. And anyway, like in Neurotech X, I posted the symposia for human brain mapping, which looked awesome. And I saw Wesley Thompson's doing one of those. It would be the kind of thing that would be super relevant for like neuroscience networks.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like, well, and psychiatry in the sense that like the data set that it's neuroimaging, but the data set that Thompson's going to talk about, I hope I'm getting that name right, is the big. It's not ABCD, but it's the other one that begins with H. So it's like a big normative data set of kids. I forget what the range is, but something like John Lyons.
Right.
But the big meeting this week was, or the extra meeting this week was the DARPA Discover DSO Day, which for some reason is singular, even though it's plural. It was over 2 days. So don't know why they insisted on the singular. Maybe it started as singular. And a lot of quantum stuff. So this is the Defense Science Office that serves as the kind of like focused unit to, as they said, it'd be the DARPA for DARPA in terms of the new emerging areas. And so the cool thing or the super relevant section was focused on collective intelligence. and no surprise, it was like they started the collective intelligence section, and it was just a big graphic from Michael Levin paper. It was like, hey, okay, I think I see that. I've got some notes and kind of the papers that they covered, but the really interesting part, is I post in a couple places, but maybe some on Neurotech X, just in terms of they have so some things I just post there because they've got a job board, and it's like, so I don't know if you've ever tried to do the same thing, but anyway, they've got like fellowship opportunities that I posted on Neurotech X opportunities, and so meeting with some of their innovation fellows. So these be like new grads that are brought in to again, like these aren't even programs yet. These are fellows brought in to create new programs, or to kind of research new program possibilities. And the great thing being that one of them was like really wanted to create a program for organoids. So that was awesome. And so I got to speak with her, and we'd already kind of shared, had some overlap in terms of people that we were tracking and events that we were going to go to. But I also pointed her some other things, and anyway, hoping to keep that conversation going. And again, it's like this is showing you that they have already identified this as an area that they want to explore. So some of it was like organ on a chip things, and of course they wanted to talk about a lot of synthetic biology, and can this be anything that would be actually in the field, and it's funny that they had, the collective intelligence group was separate from the kind of biosciences group.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because I was just like, you need to track what the collective intelligence people are talking about.
Yeah.
As Michael Evans got the morphoceuticals company, in terms of like limb regeneration, things like that.
Right.
So that was really interesting. Got to meet some people. I think I posted this in one of I forget which channel, but the George Karniadakis is the Brown, like neural physics informed neural networks stuff. I think he was there ostensibly to talk about kind of neural computation, but it was hard to get people to not talk about quantum computation.
Yeah.
Or, he was sharing the stage with a famous quantum computation person. So Anyway, Steve Brunton's got a new course, if you haven't seen that, that he's rolling out. That's all pins.
Pins,
so
like
these physics informed neural networks. Yeah. And some great papers this week too. And well, the in terms of the I put it as computational psychiatry, just this gut brain axis stuff. I think is going to be really relevant for psychiatry, but a really interesting paper that I posted there in computational psychiatry. 66,000 people's stool samples analyzed for microbiome, and one of the things they pointed out that seems kind of obvious in hindsight was that the species doesn't matter as much as the chemical signaling. So that was their kind of like their big take home message from this was that, like, what are the kind of the main chemical outputs of the species, and those kind of all blend together in terms of the gut microorganism interaction that, again, kind of makes sense in terms of how microorganisms communicate and sense themselves, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's great. Welcome, Sarthak and Sarrah. Did either of you want to give an update or anything? I know you introduced yourself last time. Thank you for that. Today I'm going to talk about neural interfaces, and one for vision and one for haptic stuff. And then I'm going to go through the virtual reality and neurotech channel to see what we have there. Because we have a lot of stuff that we don't go through usually, and it's good to go through it, in depth. So let me share my screen. So yeah, we in Slack we have like 3 months of access because we don't have a paid version for various reasons. But I back this up, and I sometimes will mirror things to other channels. We have a number of Discord channels as well, or Discord servers, and so we'll just use those for the most part. That'll work too. So yeah, this is if you're not familiar with this channel, it's in the Slack Virtual Reality Neurotech. We have a Discord server that is virtual reality oriented, and so there's a lot of stuff in there. But that's more kind of like like sort of virtual reality, augmented reality practice, trying to build things and a number of topics. This is more sort of neurotech adjacent, so we're virtual reality neurotech adjacent. So it's really kind of a nice mix of things. This is a nice. Morgan has been posting a lot in here, and so has Hussain, and I think myself and Jesse as well. So this is an article from IEEE Spectrum, New Neurotech Eschews Electricity for Ultrasound. And this is where, they use different technologies to sort of develop brain-computer interfaces. So this article is, like this figure. It's like glass brain or something. Ultrasound can be used to both stimulate and record from the brain. So they can use ultrasound rather than electrical activity. And there are a number of ultrasound technologies that you can use, but that's what they're using in this case. And so, they kind of talk about the state of the art. And so most of the companies that you've heard of are using electricity or electric signals to interact with the brain, to stimulate the brain and to record from it. This is a collaboration developing a BCI that's using a radically different medium, ultrasound. So this is Forest Neurotech and Butterfly Network.
Yeah. I believe that Butterfly, so sorry, I also follow a particular ultrasound group. And, Butterfly started as a company that was going to do a handheld, ultrasound, like medical ultrasound device, kind of like see in your belly, see, whatever doctors use in non-brain parts of your body.
Yeah.
And, Forest seems to be the, neuro-focused, and just would say that was the other part of the discovered DSO days, which they called just D3. The D3 meeting was some of the materials and like new electronics, microelectronics that could be used for ultrasound. So there are again a lot of new very thin film kind of materials that can also allow you to do detection and things that are quite amazing. Yeah.
So this is they're developing a specific type of technology here, direct focused ultrasound, or FUS. And so this can change the neuron's action potentials. And then ultrasound can also be used to estimate neural activity within the brain regions by measuring local changes in blood flow via the Doppler effect. This is functional ultrasound imaging, or FUSI, which I've never heard of, but must be a newer technique.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It's an old one though, in terms of its use in cancer treatment. This focused ultrasound technique has been talked about and developed again separately. Whole different. The Focused Ultrasound Foundation in Charlottesville has pretty much always focused on its applications in oncology and to destroy tumors. But yeah, when they found this, they found that the ultrasound stimuli, that at lower settings, that this could generate neural activity. That was really fascinating. And about 10 years ago now, it's funny. I just saw William Tyler on the first guy that I saw do it at Virginia Tech was like 10 years ago, and he was just on LinkedIn going like, "It's great to see all this fuss stuff."
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, this is supposed to allow for sub-millimeter accuracy, which of course, when you're dealing with brain imaging or with brain stimulation, sub-millimeter accuracy is crucial because you have these very small, right.
Yeah, and what they mean by that isn't so much in the imaging as in the ability to focus your stimulation, right? So that previously you've got two other things that you can do. Is like putting some electrodes on and inject and sending current into the head, right? And then you get this kind of banana shape between the electrodes,
right?
Or using these electrical coils and generating a magnetic field that induces electrical activity in the brain at some to some degree at depth, but again, it's a very broad, it's essentially a whole brain stimulation with kind of a tip focus.
Right.
So this allows you to do something that's much more focal, and again, why it was so attractive as a tumor destroyer was that you could focus on a tissue, on a somewhat deep tissue, and not hurt any of the intervening tissue to get there. That was what was really remarkable.
Yeah, so they talk about the benefits of ultrasound. So focused waves can flexibly target specific regions from outside the skull. So electrical stimulation, you'd have to go in and you have to get near the structure and then stimulate it invasively. And then, of course, you also would need deep implants or electrodes on the scalp. You can't record deep neural activity using ultrasound, but it can be done by removing a piece of skull and laying the device on the surface of the brain. So then that's sort of where they are, and they're trying to develop technologies around these, where they're trying to develop the technologies around what they can do. So, with ultrasound, you can have targeted stimulation, you can record, but they're going to, of course, be drawbacks, and those drawbacks are hopefully minimal with respect to what you can do with electricity. So,
yeah. And just one addition to this that they don't talk about is this open water health device and what it's trying to do on the imaging front, which is somewhat different in terms of how they're forming the image, in that they're trying to do some holography with their system. and the open water health, open source their designs, hardware, software, drivers this January as part of their as Photonics West, which is a big trade show in photonics. So it should be, still haven't seen. They've got a Discord. Got some people there. Haven't seen enough. We really need to get a device and see what this can do.
Yeah.
Going to try and find out more. See what it would cost to get a research setup.
Yeah. Yeah, FUSI in particular looks like it would be good for non-invasive imaging because you're basically doing something that's very compatible with fMRI, but it's, I guess, more compact or cheaper, or a number of things that are probably, there are always trade-offs with these techniques. So.
Yeah. So it has a particular kind of fMRI. What's sometimes called ASL, arterial spin labeling, in terms of trying to look at the flow, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, really interesting, and we've also seen some theoretical designs for a whole head ultrasound helmet.
Oh, okay.
And using some using techniques from geophysics to solve for the material. So what is it called? It's like full waveform inversion.
Yeah.
So a great group out of geophysics group out of Imperial College had a paper on this a couple of years ago, but I haven't seen a device yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And there's a paper of Ziping's. Let me just see that from
this one here.
Yeah, well, he's put there. That was from weeks ago. There's a paper I think I just posted in Neurotech X. Let me check here.
All right. Well, hello, Vrushali. How are you? Okay.
Sorry. You keep going there.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that. So this is behavioral imitation with artificial neural networks leads to personalized models of brain dynamics during video gameplay. This is something that Morgan found interesting, and this is really taking artificial neural networks, training them on this modeling these brain dynamics models, and this is a technique they call brain encoding. And so video games provide a promising framework for understanding brain activity in a rich, engaging, and active environment. So a major challenge raised by complex video games is that individual behavior is highly variable across subjects, and we hypothesize that ANNs need to account for subject-specific behavior in order to properly capture brain dynamics. So they use artificial neural networks to model fMRI data during video gameplay, as well as the play itself. And they use something called imitation learning to train the artificial neural network to play the game while closely replicating the unique gameplay style of individual participants. There are hidden layers of their imitation learning model successfully encoded task-relevant neural representations and predicted individual brain dynamics. So this is good stuff. People have been experimenting with sort of using neural networks to sort of approximate brain activity and other things. This is an exciting area, and putting video games into this is really interesting as well.
Yeah. I mean, I wish Hussain was here,
Oh, yeah.
Because, so one, so many of the reinforcement learning, or at least the ones the Saffron call,
Yeah.
are basically training agents to play video games. Right? I mean, the most recent like Dreamer 2, Dreamer 3 stuff is all like Atari based.
Yeah.
And anyway, so combine that with kind of a lot of the work that you see in, say, someone like Ryan Smith's group, doing computational psychiatry. You can also use these to, find differences in terms of how people explore environments, how people interact with the kind of rewards in the environment. And by environment, I mean kind of gameplay, right?
Yeah.
So great people there. I don't know if Amanda noticed, but Karen Jerby's in there from that great anesthesia edge of chaos paper, as well as Pierre Bellic, who's one of the co-founders of BrainHack, and yeah, just really cool stuff.
All right, yeah, that's great. I'm just taking some notes here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So then let's see, we have any other interesting things here. A lot of things on healthcare applications. So this is something that's of interest to the group. We have, people are trying to bring neurotech and virtual reality and, the different imaging modalities and even artificial neural networks and reinforcement learning to bear on some of this stuff. So we have some interesting talks in the channel.
Yeah, the OPMs are the MEGs that don't require super cooling.
Okay.
Right. So that's why you've got these two people that kind of look like they're, maybe wearing our kind of EEG nets.
Yeah.
But
MEG.
Yeah. But that's actually MEG. So you have the benefit of the lack of the kind of skull spatial filtering that you get with the EEG. So more focal technique. It actually is best to interdigitate EEG and MEG together, right? Okay. So they're complementary. And there's papers showing that going back to the 90s. I don't know why people don't do it more, but
well, technology is probably pretty unwieldy.
It's as you can see, it's already pretty pretty hard for them to bake what they made. But there's like Babyloni paper from certainly like late 90s showing that like adding 20 channels of EEG like really vastly improves the 100 channels of MEG.
Oh, okay. So for people who don't know, MEG is sort of a magnetic measurement, and so it's a much smaller signal, or it's a much weaker signal. It needs to be amplified in the brain, but it's something that can complement EEG as well.
Yeah. I mean, it is because it doesn't. It's not affected by the changes in density that you see with the electrical activity. It 100 channels is of MEG can resolve much smaller areas in the brain. And that's why you see mostly, the MEG units are almost always doing source localization, right? Because it's like one, they've usually got more than 100 channels, which is kind of the minimum number you want to have for kind of spatial Nyquist. And then two, it's like if you're going to spend $2 million to build this thing, you want to get everything out of it. So
Yeah. So this paper here in Cell. Okay, this is
yeah.
good. This is Dombeck. This is the Dombeck lab is at Northwestern University, and they
Oh,
do
cool.
a lot of things on building virtual reality for mice and other like rats, model
Yeah.
organisms in
Yeah.
myriads. And this is full field of view virtual reality goggles for mice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It also makes me think a little bit about that husband wife team in Indiana doing the stuff with the baby chicks.
oh right, we did talk about that last time.
Right.
Yeah, so they've been doing this. People have been doing this kind of thing for years, and the question is how do you design? Like, first of all, can you do some sort of virtual reality stimulus for model organisms?
Yeah,
And,
but also the technology for recording is allowing you to do things on freely moving animals. Right. And like, well, not only that, but the activity that you're getting versus fixing them, even with visual stimuli, is dramatically different. So it's becoming a requirement to um, allow the animal to be in as most natural an environment as possible, and to be to be experiencing as naturally as possible. So it's really cool. I think later you'll see there's a full view. Later link is there's a full view VR for inside the magnet too. Okay. For humans, just in the sense of trying to bring that in, your ability to immerse people, right, is a different experience, than looking at something over mirrors 20 feet away, that's actually a small section of your retinal print.
Right. So so the first question you might ask is, could you build a VR system for mice or for insects? And the question is that people have been able to do this, but it needs to be a little bit different for each organism. So for like insects, you usually have an arena that they put the insect in, and because the insect has compound eyes instead of camera-like eyes, the structure of the visual array is different, and it's usually a set of LEDs that they light up in different patterns. With mice, they have a visual system that's similar to humans, so they have these kind of displays that the mouse can look at, and they can introduce visual cues like looming, which is this hawk kind of trying to land on or near the mouse, and of course the mouse will react to that. But the point that Morgan made about like how this is fundamentally different as a stimulus from like something that you would normally show a subject in, say, like a normal experiment is interesting, because in normal experiments, with humans in an fMRI tube, you might have a screen or some set of mirrors that make some sort of little illusion that they can play with, or in the case of mice, you might put them in an arena and have them interact with things. But with VR, with some sort of an immersive environment that you can design for an organism, specifically for an organism and its visual system. So each mammalian system has its own sort of field of view. So how can you orient your vision with respect to space? Do you have like a 180-degree field of view, or some other arrangement? Do you have stereo vision? These sorts of things. So these are all features that you have to design into this, and so this creates a fundamentally different experience for the organism, And you can do all sorts of naturalistic stimuli as well. So you can have like continuous action, and you don't have to have the animal moving around. You can just present the action as sort of visual flow. So this is really also interesting because a lot of there are a lot of limitations to the stimuli you can present, especially with humans in the kinds of neuroimaging that we have today, because you don't want to move around too much. There's a lot of movement artifact that you can pick up, or you don't want to you don't want to have a contrived set of activities where you're just kind of looking at a screen and pressing a button, and that doesn't really reflect the real world. So this is what they're trying to do: design custom systems for mice in this case. But designing custom systems, I think, for experimental investigation, I think, is also important. So you can see here the mouse has it there. The visual system of the mouse, you characterize it as sort of the monocular fields of view and the binocular fields of view. So you have, mice have eyes on either side of their head rather than our eyes that are facing forward. And so they have a different visual field than humans. But it's still, so you have to design it a little bit differently than what you would design a VR headset for humans like. But this is basically what they're doing here. And so, yeah, this lab they're specializing in creating VR for mice. And yeah, so that's a very good article as well. Yeah, and let's see. And more stuff on brain stimulation, and there's a lot of applications of brain stimulation to, neurological disorders. But you can also do things with brain stimulation in terms of controlling objects in the world. So this is brain stimulation could help doctors learn to use surgery robots. There's this whole area of teleoperation, which is where you can take, like a joystick, and you can move things like industrial equipment, or on a video game screen you can move a character, or there's all sorts of there are all sorts of precision operations that need to be done, like in industry, on factory floors, that we don't necessarily, humans can do it, but humans are somewhat imprecise. We can do a lot more with robots, but we can do a lot of things like in surgery, where we might want to have a human expert sort of control a robot, so we can have the precision of a robot and the expertise of a human surgeon. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, the systems that I've, so one, like you said, it's focused on somewhat like what was that IARPA thing from like 2017? Anyway, like basically, can you improve people's learning performance with stimulation?
Yeah.
Right. In terms of control, the only thing that I've seen that's interesting that seems to provide real time feedback for a system is what Don Tucker, my former boss at Electrical Geodesics, would call the oh shit wave. So this is a signal that you can detect that quite reliably. That's like, no, don't do that. like oh no, and it's fast, it's detectable. And I've seen there's this guy did a presentation in Neurotech X for this doing what they call a human in the loop reinforcement learning, and he was basically using that particular signal just so that, like, while you're watching, so you can imagine this where it's like while you're watching a robot do something, almost before you can react, your brain is already like, no, don't do that. And the system can pick up that signal and it can go like, hey, wait, I need to reconsider this action.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it become useful, again, like people like Scott McCaig and others have been working on working for the Navy in terms of, is EEG useful in some fashion? And it's mostly focused on like fatigue detection and things like that, as opposed to, anything that's like fine motor control or, something that helps guide, systems, unfortunately. But
right.
it's interesting to track and certainly, fatigue and things like that are still a big problem. We've had people show up at Neurotech X meetings where they're going up to they were putting EEG in the helmets of people that do the servicing of the big wind turbines.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they also wanted kind of just a fatigue detector. But also someone who was working on the deep sea submersibles that from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. What is it? Not, it's more than that though. Like Oceanographic Institute there, Monterey. And again, I'm super curious to see what they can, if the electrical activity provides anything other than kind of, additional physio monitoring.
Yeah. This is interesting in light of like the ever good regulator stuff. So like, if you're thinking about a good regulator, your behavior is sort of regulated by your, you have a brain circuit that regulates your behavior. It consults what's going on in the environment, and it kind of, says this is obvious error. I mean, if you're operating something, you have these small, you have this sort of minor control where you're just kind of keeping things aligned. And, like if you're performing surgery, you have to make sure that your hand doesn't tremor or anything like that, or you have to, keep your mind on the task. But then you have these big errors that might occur. Like if there's an unexpected event, like you hit a vein or you're in a warehouse and you hit something and you have to stop what you're doing and make a big correction, right? So I was thinking about this in terms of the Evergood regulator theorem. So there are different signals or different intensities of signals that you have to operate from. So in the environment, you have different intensities of feedback. So sometimes it's just kind of a normal feedback where you're kind of doing something and there's a little bit of correction that needs to be made. And then sometimes there's a large signal where you have to really kind of make a large scale correction. And so that's not the typical kind of control that we think about too much. Like we think about like control as being this, very gradual thing, but it's just kind of interesting how we might be able to, I don't know what the literature in that area looks like, if that's something that we could draw from maybe for the paper or maybe for another paper and talking about that. Yeah, let's see. Okay. So this is the open water. This is what Morgan was talking about. Did you have anything to say about that?
No, just want to, Mary Lou Jepson is the, you might know from the One Laptop Per Child's project. She's got incredible credentials in terms of, electronics and, electrical engineering. And, she's put out some test images that they've collected that look really interesting. And, again, like, they seem to now fully control their hardware and software stack in the sense of like they're it's all them, right? And there are drivers, and they were previously using some equipment that came from I believe it was an Italian company anyway, but like a fuss company.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to learn more. There's a lab at UCSF here that's using this Italian company that I'm curious about too, in terms of what, because it's one thing to have hardware working. That's great. What are they? Some of these companies are still using a third-party software for visualization, and so I'm really new to the whole ecosystem and want to learn more. I put some links because this is kind of neurotech. I put some links you can check out a company called Brainbox in the UK. Okay. And Brainbox has an annual conference, but they do I would say kind of like quarterly webinars covering. So Brainbox sells everything, like from high density EEG systems to FUS systems to TMS, the big coils to do the magnetic stimulation, and everything in between.
Yeah.
And they do webinars on all of these, and their webinars I really like in terms of the researchers that they get to present. So I mean they get actual researchers to present kind of technology that they use in their lab, right?
Right.
Even though they're in a sense they're doing a sales thing, but it's the most informative sales pitch I've ever had.
Yeah.
In that it's researchers telling you how they use that equipment.
Right.
and that's awesome. So I really recommend the guy that they've got. I'm blanking on his name, but I want to say it's a Dutch name, which is why it's so hard for my English speaking brain to remember how to spell it. But they're at Radboud. Anyway, I can look up if anybody's interested.
Yeah.
But really, really exciting stuff.
Yeah.
From Open Water.
So this is the Fluid Interfaces group at MIT. This is designing systems for cognitive support. So we've been talking a lot about sort of neuroimaging heavy stuff here, but this is on things that are sort of integrating this with design of the interface and some psychological things and what they call psychology in the wild, which is a sort of naturalistic stimulus that we were talking about earlier. So this is, I don't know if Jesse highlighted this lab before. I think he did, but
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I of course those cool kids at MIT are doing some nifty things with stuff. I think the first time I saw him was the silent speech. So was actually putting electrodes here and capturing muscle activity. Anyway, I really like these bands that you saw there in that top image. There's something called a C grid that can go right behind your ear, and again, when you get into the nitty gritty of these systems, like dealing with hair is usually the biggest problem that you have. So that's why you see a lot of systems that focus on the forehead or focus on something. Like capturing all those electrodes around the eye, you're really not going to be looking at anything except muscle activity. Or eye blinks, like it's not giving you, and I say that like, if you look at an EGI picture, we've got a bunch of electrodes here too, and that was just because our boss insisted on having 128 electrodes, even though we run out of places to put them anywhere else. But very cool, and you see you can see how you can imagine how that can be added to a virtual reality headset too, right?
Yeah. And also another word about this is that you can combine different types of sensors. So like on the forehead, you might be trying to capture something like, some sort of brain activity. And then
near infrared.
And then they'll use EEG sensors on the cheeks, say, to measure the muscle activity. So you get like this sort of affective interface or affective computing interface where you can get multiple modes of like interaction. You can get some frontal brain activity and then, of course, facial muscle activity, which is key in emotion. And so put those things together, right?
It's hard because, again, I mean, this is actually why you want the silent speech.
Right.
Is that you want them to not move their jaw.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, again, there's some really interesting, from, I also attended, Ben Blazek's, that guy at Argonne who does the material science. I'd sent you his name a while back. Anyway, there was a big material science meeting this week too. And there's just really interesting stuff in terms of like e-skin, right? So it's like materials that can capture, as you're moving, catch that stretch. Would that be piezoelectric?
Yeah, piezoelectric.
Yeah. and anyway, that would be really interesting to capture with kind of EEG electrodes, or electrodes that are potentially getting something like galvanic skin response or something. You don't want the muscles moving at all, right? Yeah. And so I think that is what's really interesting about some of these new groups that are developing systems that can do detection of multiple different kind of modalities in the way we traditionally talk about them. And they're fitting it all into a thin film. And it's really amazing.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that later. I have some interesting stuff on that, but
cool.
So the idea here is to capture these signals, but of course a lot of times when you put these on in practice, you're getting some motion artifact, so then it needs to be filtered out if possible. So sometimes they have these systems for like video games where you can put it on and you can control your video game, and sometimes you're moving your head, and it's largely picking up the movement artifact and just translating that into the game. So I mean, when you see these kind of systems, you have to realize that there's a lot of online, software correction and things like that that are going on under the hood. So it's not easy to implement because that filtering and stuff takes computational power. So if you're putting it into say like a virtual reality headset environment, you have to have you have to spend computation on doing that, as well as rendering the graphics of the environment and everything else. So it's really interesting how to integrate these things into meaningful interactions to get the signals that you want, but also processing that in real time, especially when you're trying to map it to something in a computer environment. Then the augmentation lab from Harvard. This is a student lab, and they're doing a lot of stuff with human augmentation. So this is, they have a flashy website here, but they have, let's see, the technical work publications, the publications, we have, let's see, coming soon, technical work. We have a number of projects here. And so, a lot of things with haptics, and
you can see an open BCI thing there. That's that crown that person's wearing.
Supernumerary limb, which is actually something that's a very classic thing in augmentation studies. Like people have made like third hands and tails in this case and controlled it in different ways.
Yeah, really, from the old, just having the glasses flip the world. It's kind of like the next thing, and yeah, it's really cool. Seeing people learn to get control over those.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting stuff going on there. Okay, so yeah, this is the Immerse. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Jesse had posted something from Neurotech X, EEG.
Oh yeah, that's the renaming of the EEG notebooks.
Okay.
So Neurotech X, EEG XP, and then those are okay. Yeah, so that was a post from OpenBCI, and those are some of the PhysioNet is a really old physio database. Still somewhat useful. Moab though is what I recommend, just because Moab collects a lot of things like PhysioNet data sets, and it gives you, Moab's kind of an extension of scikit-learn, or it's basically a bunch of scikit-learn like extensions that allow you to download EEG data sets and to start benchmarking, and it gives you some algorithm implementations that you can test against as you develop things. And of course, the big thing is nemar.org, NEMAR, which is the new thing between Scott McCaig's lab and Russ Poldrack at Open Neuro. So that's got, in terms of EEG, MEG data sets, it's the one.
Yeah.
And then Neurodata Without Borders. It's through them that I learned about Dandy Archive, which is more a database of kind of non-human primate rat, mouse data sets, Electrophus and others.
Yeah, so there's some really good resources there for like secondary data if people are interested in analyzing data that other people have collected, because it costs money to collect data, and we don't, for example, as a lab, have resources to collect data, but other groups have done things in different contexts that we might be able to use. And then, of course, we have other projects like OpenBCI. So there are a lot of opportunities for like data science here. And we can talk about that later if we want.
For sure.
And so, this is Habitat 3.0. This is something, this was a meetup.
Yeah. So this is meta. This is kind of a meta environment. For those familiar with robotics research and kind of Ross Gazebo, Habitat is Meta's kind of arena gym for doing this this kind of human robot interaction research, and so it's nice. BuzzRobot, I feel like it's had another name previously. But anyway, it seems to be a group in the Bay Area that organizes meetups, and they get some pretty interesting researchers. So I pushed it because, like, in terms of VR, I've said before, not really sure what to do with VR myself, but but interacting, like how it's used in both reinforcement learning and for robotics simulations is essential, right? So all the kind of DeepMind's work is all, hey, we don't need to we don't need to actually play real games. We can play games in simulations, right?
So this is sort of like Open Gym, which is the thing we're doing.
It's essentially it's an open gym with a focus. Okay. Where like I could see that a lot of their research work was focused on, like, if we made a robot that was going to be helping you at home, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you see this a lot with Gazebo. You see this with the Human Brain Project Neurorobotics platform. You've got to design. You've got to basically produce all the what do they call them? The assets. This is kind of taking it from the game development community, right? So talk about Unity assets, right?
Right.
And what they just mean by that is, the geometry files for the particular objects that are in the environment, right, as well as the kind of the geometry of the world, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, Habitat is very focused on giving you kind of multiple homes that your robot is, either it's an actual human doing things, running an agent, or it's a human agent.
Yeah.
Or a human geometry agent, right? And then it's, does the robot, very focused on making sure that the robot stays out from underfoot, right? So that if it's following you around, is it getting in the way? And things you wouldn't think would be necessarily a problem, but when you actually think about putting it in someone's home, especially if it's say focused on elder care or something like that, it's super essential, right? And you can't have this thing causing more problems than it's helping.
So we have actually Hussain posted something integrating Unity with neurofeedback, and this is a Udemy course. So this is
thanks. Yeah.
Cool.
There you go. Glad they're making it all public. Integrating Unity with neurofeedback in a public course. So even though it's really, really, really specialized.
Yeah. Well, that looks interesting. Yeah. And we have 3 fires for it, so that's good. Thanks for that, Hussain. This is the Dombeck. So I put a link to the Dombeck lab in here. This is their lab website, and it's just basically going over some of the work that they're doing. And then this is the paper. I think this is another paper from there. Oh, this is the same paper actually. So I didn't actually look because sometimes the papers you just put the link and it doesn't put the preview. So then Vrushali, she posted this from LinkedIn. The promise of VR as an immersive therapeutic. So this is where they talk about VR as a therapeutic approach, and so that's great. Morgan posted the science paper on the ICO3 avatar system, enabling fully remote immersive embodiment of humanoid robots. So
and I again, I first saw iCub at a Human Brain Project meeting years ago. So this is apparently new iteration.
That's okay. Let's see. I'm just trying to get through some of this. Is a book. Hussain posted. His friend wrote this book, Interfaceless.
my friend Diana's a colleague of mine. It's not just some friend thing going on. No, Diana Olenek, XR engineer and host of the XR podcast. She hosts people regularly on YouTube and other platforms. And this book, which I have in front of me, so I can share it too. She just recently published this book. She recently published this book. Here it is. And you can take a look inside too. So this book's really great. First of all, you might read this title and say, "Oh, spatial computing and all the possibilities with generative AI and understanding what that looks like in a traditional user interface." A lot of people would read that and be like, "What the hell is even that? What is she even talking about?" Basically, this book is a very great interview and introduction or an overview to understanding how to create user interfaces in XR, so the 3D universe from a spatial computing perspective, taking advantage of technologies like GANs, generative adversarial networks, variational autoencoders, autoregressive models, so taking advantage of AI when using it as well, taking advantage of different types of technology, and introducing it to the reader in a way that they can easily understand. She goes into some technical and academic details here and there, like understanding like what exactly is a GAN, like a generative adversarial network, but for the sake of understanding those things, like she's not like giving you like some math lesson or something. But overall, this book is a great introduction for anyone who's interested in understanding how to create user interfaces in the virtual world. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks. Let's see. So yeah, that's Interfaceless, and that's available. And I guess she also does a podcast, so that's great too. And then this, I think, was from an earlier meeting. Actually, I don't know what this one is here. 3D immersive virtual lab simulation developed to teach novices sterile mammalian cell culture techniques. So this must be from this paper here, the bioRxiv paper. Student experiences with an interactive 3D immersive biotechnology simulation and its impact on motivational beliefs. So this is an educational study. So this is where they use virtual laboratories to augment in-person skills training. So this is something very much in line with the educational aspects of VR and teaching people skills in biotechnology. And so in this study, an interdisciplinary team of content experts, video game researchers, instructional designers, and assessment experts developed a 3D immersive simulation designed to teach novice scientists the technical skills necessary to perform sterile mammalian cell culture technique, which is very, it takes a lot of technique to do that properly. So this is what they're trying, and you could do this with any, technique laden thing, like even surgery. That's one of the things that, like, we were talking about earlier. So this is kind of going through how this educational process works. They kind of work in this real world lab setting, so they're able to simulate the lab setting, but also allow for immediate feedback on technical skills as well as procedural execution. But unlike in an in-person laboratory course, students are able to iterate and practice their skills outside of class time and learn from their mistakes. So you can actually use the system outside of the formal class time. In an in-person class, you would have to, or a real-world class, you would have like that one period where you could do the experiments. So this is sort of the advantage of this approach. And so they did like some educational evaluation here, and they showed that student science identity remained unchanged, while their science self-efficacy, which means their ability to do things for themselves, increased. Students had positive perceptions of the benefits of virtual stimulation. These data suggest that the virtual cell culture simulation can be a useful pedagogical training tool to bolster students' motivational beliefs that is both accessible and easy to implement. So that's a good paper for like sort of the educational value of VR. Thank you, Hussain, for posting that. And Morgan said, I really like this.
Especially the best thing about that is showing the research, like the actual evidence-based research that this is a really good thing. That's what's been holding a lot of people back in VR technology, trying to get it implemented in education. So
yeah, finding the right way to present things in VR. Yeah, it's very, very challenging.
Speaking of the book I showed you, the book I showed you, by the way, Interface This. I'm planning on interviewing Diana pretty soon too. Hopefully, I can host her on my channel on Twitch and see where things go.
So that would be great.
Yeah, I told her because she uses YouTube, she uses Instagram, and I'm like, Diana, you should use Twitch, and she thought that was the weirdest thing ever. She's saying Twitch is for video games. I'm like, no, you can use it for science. You can use it for science too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we have, of course, the Brain Computer Interface Designers Hackathon. This is something that is happening soon, but it's not a North America friendly thing in terms of the schedule. But yeah, definitely, if you're interested in this area, there are a lot of hackathons that you can attend. Did you want to say something about that, Hussein? Or
No, other than it's going to be at 2 a.m. Eastern.
yeah.
So,
So yeah, we have a bunch of more stuff on neuroimaging and some of the things on so a lot of the same stuff we've talked about. I went to a different channel actually. Okay, so this is actually the bottom of the channel. There's the surgical gym, a high-performance GPU-based platform for reinforcement learning with surgical robots, which is more of this training. They have these open gym platforms, where you can train agents. In this case, it's robot-assisted surgery, so you have the individual interacting with the robot. The robot needs to be trained to be of use. So recent advances in robot-assisted surgery have resulted in progressively more precise, efficient, and minimally invasive procedures, sparking a new era of robotic surgical intervention. This enables doctors, in collaborative interaction with robots, to perform traditionally or minimally invasive surgeries with improved outcomes through smaller incisions. So this is again doing these training the robot to help a surgeon and to make these small corrections in their task. And so it's this procedural learning that kind of proceeds in a way. So they're actually using deep reinforcement learning. This offers scalable solutions for surgical automation, but their effectiveness relies on extensive data acquisition. So we need to have a lot of data to train the deep reinforcement learning models that can then help the robots sort of be in, I don't want to say in the mindset of the surgeon, but to be of use to the surgeon and to be coordinated with the surgeon. We introduced Surgical Gym, an open source high performance platform for surgical robot learning, where both the physics simulation and reinforcement learning occur directly in the GPU. So it's actually on a chip, so it's not like you're having to move the training to another location. You do the physics, like I said, this is all a matter of computation. So if you're doing multiple things on the same device or a chip, this makes it more challenging, but in this case, they're able to do this. And it's 100 to 5,000 times faster training time compared to previous surgical learning platforms.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because this is the guy from UC Santa Cruz that started Open Neuromorphic.
Okay, Open Neuromorphic, really?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll have to. So, who is that? Which author is that?
Jason Escher Gagnon.
Yeah.
Sorry, I never say any of these names out loud.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, check out Open Neuromorphic. They do, it's a great community for neuromorphic computing, and I'm guessing that part of this is really the GPU, the high performance.
Yeah.
For this particular researcher.
Yeah.
But I thought about it, just as it relates to these, medical problems, but also, what Hussein had sent along too, in terms of, some of the best kind of applications of VR that I've seen have really focused on basically medical operations or ICU,
right?
And doing things that require, kind of like cell culture, but doing things that require an incredible, it's like a flight simulator for surgery, right?
Yeah.
Is what you want, right?
Right.
and because the same kind of thing, it's life or death, so if you can create a super realistic environment for that. And there's a group. Well, it's a project under. Kitware is a commercial company, but they have given us all these toolkits, open source toolkits, VTK, ITK, CMake, which like almost every project uses now. CMake is a Kitware project. Kitware has gotten into these kinds of what's it called? It's physio something. Anyway, it's basically creating other libraries that you would want to use in these kind of medical operation simulations. And it's interesting to me because it's funny how, well, it just turns out that one of the best ways to clean up near infrared data is to have a really good physio model of the subject. So, capturing their respiration, blood pressure, all of those kinds of things as a good model, based way of cleaning up what they call NIRS data.
Yeah. So back to the thing you were talking about with comparing the robotic assisted surgery with a flight simulator. So we know from flight simulators, it's not really it is the hyper realistic aspect where you have the actual sort of controls and everything, but also the ability of transfer of training, what they call transfer of training. So like some tasks are very easily transferable. Like in a flight simulator, we know that if you have a simulation of a cockpit and you're training people to fly a plane, they're the basic control mechanisms that you learn that can be simulated and you can see the result. That's easy to transfer to the real world. And I think surgery also falls into that category. But that's always been a problem in VR too, is, when you train someone in some environment, does it transfer to the real world or not? And sometimes, depending on the task or the environment, sometimes the environment is of low quality, so hyperrealism is very important there. But sometimes it, maybe doesn't matter so much. And so, I'm just wondering, like, what the relationship is between those two things.
I mean, ultimately, from what I understand, like when I would have discussions with Benjamin Alsbury-Neely up in Toronto. He's the founder of this startup called Silico Labs. He creates these VR environments for scientists to perform research in the virtual world. And it's a no-code framework for scientists themselves to create and conduct experiments themselves. And he also works with many other groups in using VR technology for their own benefits too. Like he's worked with schools and helping them with active shooter training by creating VR simulation things for that. He's worked like with police departments and with schools themselves too, with like creating like VR active shooter training scenarios to prepare people for their situation. And like from what we've spoken about, he knows that like in the virtual augmented reality world, yes, it's very, very different from the real world. It is very different from the real world. But like at the very least, it is one of those things that we more or less like accepted. You just have to try your best with it and know in real life when you're actually performing surgery, things are going to be different. Things are different. Yeah.
Well, transfer of training was that?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's fine. That's fine. Like, okay. I mean, even any sort of like motor control refinement sort of activity improves your ability as a surgeon. It really does. Right. Like, you can play video games, and I swear you might become more adept at surgery if you're paying close attention, depending specifically on what you're doing and how you're practicing. But like no one takes like a virtual like say like C-section as the real thing. It's like, no, we're just practicing in the virtual world. Yeah.
So transfer for context here, transfer of training is a classic sort of topic in human factors, but it's kind of hard to quantify, especially for a lot of the when you're making these environments sort of broad outside of the classic example of flight simulators. And I guess surgery would be, I don't know what the literature looks like on transfer of training in surgery, but like when you start building these environments for a larger set of things in the world? It's, an interesting question. And of course, what you said is true, Hussein. Yeah, there's Silica Labs linked to that. That, you can learn skills. It doesn't mean that you transfer everything you learn, but you learn skills in virtual environments like playing video games, hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, I mean, Benjamin has found that when performing research, when performing experiments in the virtual world, whatever data you collect is very transferable to those same experiments in the real world. You want someone to complete a task, but you can't afford to have them come into a task that requires like immersion, like how someone responds to like things in their environment, but you can't afford to have them come into the office so frequently. Just make them put on a headset doing VR too. And from what he's done, from what he's studied, and how things have gone about, it does show that it is practical and applicable on the same playing field as real world results. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
I was just going to say that some of the most sophisticated operations are, of course, neurosurgery. I don't know if you've covered this already, but pre-surgical planning is a topic that or is a research area in itself, right? And it relates to this point about focused ultrasound in terms of how do we destroy something that's deep in the brain without destroying the brain on the way to get there, right? Or at least if you had to do surgery, this is why surgery was so dangerous or so destructive. And so the pre-surgical planning was a big part of trying to do neurosurgery so that it doesn't cause more problems than it solves, and is a really recent innovation in the sense that like we've only had like brain surgery that doesn't kill you, for the last 100 years. And anyway, so like I think it would be really useful in terms of that, or certainly in terms of kind of the complex set of instruments and other factors that come into it to do these surgeries well now. Or, again, like I would defer to the people doing it, but it's really interesting. Some of the people that are doing the best kind of speech decoding, like Eddie Chang's lab at UCSF is, like half of his papers are just on how to improve brain surgery.
Yeah,
which are really interesting, and it would be, I'd be really interested to see if that's like surgical robots. The other thing I was going to say, sorry, I had to get a bone for my dog so that she would be happy for the next half an hour listening to me. The GRASP lab at University of Michigan, which is just a really famous robotics lab, has a talk this week on a kind of history of medical robotics, or like is part of this guy's talk. Yeah, it would be. It's interesting to go over, and so I thought about the surgical gym in terms of using medical robots, but kind of combining that together with these kind of VR training that Hussein's talking about would be really interesting in terms of neurosurgery.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
There is the one last. If you go down to the bottom there, Ziping Zhang had a paper that was this fall that's really cool.
This one here?
Is it? Let me get my glasses. Sorry. Yes, I think so. Is it with the LLMs? Yeah, eye tracking. Yeah. So again, for those who don't know, Ziping Chung is the assistant director at the Schwartz Center for Computational Neuroscience, which is the institution that Scott McCaig runs. He's the director. And so Ziping's done a lot of previous work on kind of like steady state VEPs for brain-computer interface. And anyway, when I saw this, well, everybody's using LLMs, but Ziping, it's probably worth seeing what he's doing as someone who's been doing these kinds of things, great kind of non-invasive, low-cost systems for doing this kind of thing for decades now. And so, yeah, just wanted to note that.
So this is generative pre-trained transformers, and this is for reading comprehension and integrating some of these physiological measurements. So EEG, eye tracking, and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's a sort of a hot area, is merging all this stuff together.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And I totally should have posted that here, but the lab kind of developed this lab streaming layer, which is the software that is really useful, but not it's not sexy at all in the sense, like it's not doing, it's the glue that allows you to combine multiple devices together.
Okay.
Right. And it's been around forever. And anyway, they've got a new paper out in bioRxiv from a week ago. So everybody, well, yeah.
Yeah, it's that's like the holy grail of computer science, is like networking printers, basically.
It is. I mean, it's to some degree, it's just glorified NTP, right?
Yeah.
But it's really, again, it's like until you try and put like 5 devices together that don't share a hardwired clock, like you don't get how hard this is, and you want to do neuroimaging at the same time. Right. Like that's the kicker.
So I have a couple of things here. So there were a number of papers, the number of things that came out this week. There were actually 2 things I wanted to talk about. So these are kind of related to neurotech and VR and that sort of thing. So this paper actually talks about one of the things that we're interested in, which is this idea of cross-modal plasticity and skill acquisition. So this paper actually is, so we're going to talk about some neuroscientific type things and then talk about some technologies. So this paper is called A Unified Model for Cross-Modal Plasticity and Skill Acquisition. This is, the authors are here, and the abstract reads, historically, cross-modal plasticity following early blindness has been largely studied in the context of visual deprivation. So this is something that, people are developing visual prosthetics for people who can't see, who suffer from blindness. And the idea is we want to reconnect that pathway and allow people to see using some sort of prosthetic. So it might be a set of glasses, as we'll see, or some other type mode of being able to generate sight, basically. So this is something, but this is a topic that goes beyond this sort of immediate concern. And there's this whole area of cross-modal plasticity that occurs as a result of early blindness. So people who go blind, say in the womb, they don't develop their visual system properly, that the visual cortex is not projected to, because there's nothing to project. There is no visual experienced. There's no visual system to project to it. So that part of the cortex is sort of open. And so what tends to happen is the other senses sort of project to that part of cortex, and people who are early, what they call early blinds, will often have enhanced senses, other senses that are enhanced. So like enhanced hearing or enhanced touch or something like that. And so this is a question of cross-modal plasticity, because the idea is that your cortex, the different senses project to your cortex, and they do so by going to certain parts of the cortex. But there's also a lot of cross-modal plasticity that occurs where the multiple sensory streams are coming together and being integrated. So this is a good system to look at cross-modal plasticity, and cross-modal plasticity is a huge issue in terms of these kind of prosthetics and so forth.
Did they say how long it takes to get that kind of development? I mean, if I blindfolded myself,
yeah,
how soon?
So-
I mean, again, thinking about that those 1950s, goggles experiments.
Yeah, so that's not quite the same thing. So if you were to blindfold yourself or experience like what they call the prism illusion, it's there's minor plasticity that goes along with that. But the reason they use the early blinds as a model is because you have this massive plasticity. So when you deprive, in fact, you can see this in like sensory deprivation experiments at a smaller scale in like rats, where you deprive them of certain senses and the connections don't develop, and you get this massive plasticity as a result. Once things are in place developmentally, that plasticity is much less. And so anything you do to intervene can be much less, have much less of an effect. So this paper talks a little bit about this, but also in terms of skill acquisition. So more recently, there has been a shift. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, there's been a shift
So you're talking about developmental blindness.
The early blind paradigm is developmental. So, yeah. More recently, there has been a shift in focus towards understanding cross-modal plasticity from the perspective of skill acquisition. So this is where we think of cross-modal plasticity, and then in development, later on in development, we have skill acquisition. So the striking plasticity observed in early blind individuals reflects the extraordinary perceptual and cognitive challenges they solve. So, the reason why we have this massive plasticity in the early blinds is because, there's this solution of sort of the perceptual and cognitive mechanisms that come into being in development. Here, inspired by two seminal papers on skill learning, what they call the cortical recycling theory and cross-modal plasticity, the metamodal hypothesis, respectively, we present a unified hypothesis of cortical specialization that describes how shared functional, algorithmic, and structural constraints might mediate both types of plasticity. Now, before this paper, I was only familiar with sort of the neurobiological data on early blinds, and there's a lot of it in the literature, but I've never seen anyone connect it with skill learning. So basically, you can build skills as you have these sensory experience, and so your skill learning is much different when you don't have, say, visual inputs to learn from. So this is kind of the argument they're making, and they go through the sort of the ideas here. So this is a theory paper, and it kind of gets into the literature on this. Our postulates are essentially a synthesis of two papers that discuss cross-modal plasticity and complex skill learning. So in 2001, there was this paper by Pasquale-Leone and Hamilton called The Metamodal Organization of the Brain. And this proposed that the traditional view of the brain as being organized in parallel unimodal sensory systems was incorrect. So, we don't just have like a visual system, an auditory system, a motor system. We have those systems, but they interact a lot more than we would give them credit for. And so instead, cortical organization might actually represent a metamodal structure organized as operators that execute a given function or computation regardless of sensory input modality. So this has implications for these visual prosthetics. So if you're trying to restore vision in like an early blind, or maybe even someone with low vision, you want to think about cortical organization and cortical plasticity. You want to get that right to get the most efficacy out of your technology. Just a few years later, in cultural recycling of cortical maps, Jain and Cohen, and there are a couple of citations here, proposed that skill learning leads to specialized cortical regions, such as the visual world form area or areas involved in numerosity, as a consequence of what they call neuronal recycling, which is the development of cortical areas for culturally novel skills, and this takes place by repurposing evolutionarily older circuits. So this is more like what happens when you have an early blind and they lose their visual connections. You have other senses that come in and recruit that area and use it. So this is, again, this neuronal recycling and this idea of metamodal organization, where basically, the traditional model of the separate sensory streams is not really the whole story. Really, it's about how they can complement each other, but also when some of them are missing or deficient, other senses can fill in the gaps. And so this is really interesting.
Absolutely, yeah, and Don's well known for his numerosity work. Who's the Cohen? Can you check who that
Jain and
is?
Cohen.
I'm just
Yeah. So this is here L. Cohen. I don't know who that is. But.
L. Cohen. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's a neuron. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's that paper, and it's I think it's a frame for what they're going to talk about in this paper. And this paper is, what's that?
Yeah, I was this what's this dreaming theory too, right?
Right.
that we dream so that our cortex isn't taken over, sleeping, and utilized for, utilized for other purposes. Anyway, yeah, just the other side to that.
That's one of the more reasonable theories of why we dream. So,
right. Yeah. That's actually one of the more practical.
One of the more, like, say, empirically.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads us to this paper here, which is this where they're trying to develop a prosthetic for, or a treatment at least for people who have these prosthetics, who want to be able to restore their sight. And what they're doing in this paper is they're using something called phosphine simulation for the differentiable optimization of visual cortical prostheses. So let's get into the abstract here. Okay, there we go. The abstract reads, blindness affects millions of people around the world. A promising solution to restoring a form of vision for some individuals are cortical visual prostheses. So they put these things on their eyes, or in the form of the visual pathway, and they stimulate the visual pathway to try to restore it. This bypasses part of the impaired visual pathway by converting camera input to electrical stimulation of the visual system. So you'll have like a something in the front of your face. You don't have to have it there, but they'll put it's like the visor that Geordi wore in Star Trek: The Next Generation. That visor would have like cameras in it, and then it would convert those. And I don't know if this is actually how it's supposed to work, but it would convert that into electrical stimulation, which would then go into the visual, into the visual pathway or into the visual nerves, and then it would go into the brain, and so you would be able to re-stimulate that those set of connections and maybe get some sort of visual restoration. The artificially induced visual percept, a pattern of localized light flashes, or phosphines. So these are light flashes that are going to be have some sort of spatial resolution. have limited resolution, and a great portion of the field's research is devoted to optimizing the efficacy, efficiency, and practical usefulness of encoding visual information. So one thing you have to do here is you have to be able to encode all the visual information, say like a camera would pick up, into electrical signals. And so this is kind of like brain-machine interfaces where they do things with sensory motor cortex. They try to like stimulate the brain, but also get signals out of the brain. And they, a lot of the best brain-machine interfaces that you'll see today are sensory motor, because that's maybe an easy system to work with. And so you can actually bypass, say, like spinal cord injuries by like, rerouting those signals around the block or whatever it is that's damaged, and restore, the activity or the pathway. So a commonly exploited method is non-invasive functional evaluation in sighted subjects or with computational models by using simulated prosthetic vision or SPV pipelines. So we want to be able to balance enhanced perceptual realism, biological plausibility, and real-time performance in the simulation of cortical prosthetic vision. So what they're doing here is they're introducing a biologically plausible PyTorch-based phosphine simulator. So they're using PyTorch as a way to simulate this. It's easy to implement because, PyTorch is a common platform. It's biologically plausible, so we can actually be sure that it'll probably work. And we can simulate these phosphine flashes that can run in real time and use differentiable operations to allow for gradient-based computational optimization of these encoding models. So the simulator integrates a wide range of clinical results with neurophysiological evidence in both humans and non-human primates. So this is something that you need to be able to restore not only sort of this sort of visual capacity, but you need to train the visual system as well, because you can't just, sort of put an electrical, or you can't electrically stimulate the visual pathway and have it magically work. It needs to be trained like you would be trained in development. And for, say, like early blinds, they don't have that experience. So these are things that need to happen. So the pipeline includes a model of retinotopic organization, which is the basic spatial and complexity organization of the retinotopic maps in like V1, and cortical magnification of the visual cortex. Moreover, the quantitative effects of stimulation parameters and temporal dynamics are incorporated, and then this shows their results shows the simulator suitability for both computational applications such as end-to-end deep learning based prosthetic vision, as well as behavioral experiments. And so they actually have an open source software package that they talk about in the paper. And so that is that paper. And so if we go to their website, this is their website. So this is what they call the voice. This is Peter Meyer from the Netherlands, Peter B.L. Meyer. And this kind of talks about what their vision is for this. So they have these products that they've kind of put out, these different glasses. So this is the Vuzix Blade. And you can see that it takes in information from the front. They have cameras, and they also have auditory, so they have earbuds, and then you have this it turns it into electrical impulses then that can be used to do some of these things. So they have these different models, and then they also have, they have it for Android, for Windows. They also have an open source repo on GitHub. So this is from the Neural Coding Lab. This is Dynaphos. This is a set of files here. This project is a fully differentiable and biologically plausible simulation of cortical prosthetic vision, which can be used for end-to-end optimization. So the point here is that this is the repo from the paper that we just talked about. And so they have all this stuff open source. They have these kind of prosthetics that exist. And so the hardware is there, the software is there. And so now, maybe we can kind of move along in this field. And it's really interesting. I didn't know that we were like doing these sorts of things. But yeah.
that is a really cool project. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
I'd love to see those links.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the other thing is this other. It's actually a startup, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I'll talk about these papers really quickly. So this is actually skin-integrated wireless haptic interfaces for virtual and augmented reality. So this is where you're working on artificial skin and integrating haptic interfaces into the skin. So maybe last year, I think last fall, we talked about haptic interfaces and some of the things that they're doing with different types of shapes for the sensors. So like, haptic information is it's locally spatially complex. You have a lot of geometry to deal with, and so they had these. I think it was Kurigami, which was the approach that they used to design these sensors.
Yeah, which is what the Stanford group used for electrode array for organoids.
Yeah. So I guess there are a lot of benefits to it, and it's also easy to fabricate. But anyways, so traditional technologies for VR and AR create human experiences through visual and auditory stimuli that replicate sensations associated with the physical world. The most widespread VR and AR systems use head-mounted displays, accelerometers, and loudspeakers, and this creates a three-dimensional computer-generated environment. And the skin, of course, is underexplored in this paradigm. And so, if we could build like something that would, augment this. So here we present a wireless battery-free platform of electronic systems and haptic, that is touch-based interfaces, capable of softly laminating onto the curved surfaces of the skin. So this research group is actually based at UIUC. This is John Rogers' group. And they build these these flexible electronics that conform to surfaces on the skin, or you can fold it up in different ways and curve it. And so the electronics, they operate like a hard board that you might buy in the store, or whatever. But these are flexible, so they actually bend and fold in different ways. And so this is quite useful for conforming to the surface of the skin. And so this communicates information via spatially temporally programmable patterns of localized mechanical vibration. So you can get the mechanical vibrations at the skin. The flexible electronics will pick that up in different places on the skin. It'll transmit this signal into your battery of signals that you have to build your environment. We describe the materials, device structures, power delivery strategies, and communication schemes that serve as the foundations for such platforms. The resulting technology creates many opportunities for use where the skin provides an electronically programmable communication and sensory input channel to the body. So, one of the things that have been holding back haptic feedback is that it had, you just maybe wear like these bulky gloves, which are really expensive, or you have these big sensors on your fingers, and it's not naturalistic. If you have like flexible electronics, if you were wearing, say, a pair of gloves that look more like latex gloves than like winter gloves, then that would be much better. It would be much more effortless feedback that you would get from that. And so then the final paper is this review. It's actually, I think, in Get Mobile. I'm not sure what that is, but so this is from Adil Akhtar, and he's the CEO and founder of Psionic, which is actually a startup. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So Psionic. I mean, if it's the same Psionic, they were just on. They were on Shark Tank last night.
Yeah, that's it.
So on Neurotech X, I've got a lot of prosthesis work, and like I'm not so much a prosthesis person, but really interested in giving prosthesis the ability to sense, or even just that feedback that human, that living systems need to be able to control the limb properly.
Yeah.
Right. So some of the anyway. So there's some really good links, but yeah. So that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. This they were on Shark Tank recently. So this is sort of the applications domain from this research. This article is 3D printing hands that feel. And so they kind of get into some of the aspects of how this is useful. So, amputation is a problem where you lose function and sensation. You want to restore that. And so you do a similar thing to what you do with vision. And so in this case, amputation happens during life. So it doesn't happen early in development. So that, you need to restore some of this plasticity to restore function. But it's not as widespread as like something we'd see with our early blinds. So we have a couple of points here they're making. One is a hand that can conform to and quickly grasp a variety of objects. So that's one need that we have. We need to be able to build better prostheses because the types of prosthetics that we've had up until very recently have changed little since the 1800s. So they've been like mechanical hooks or other types of things that don't articulate like real hands. And so this is actually also useful for virtual environments, for building interfaces where you can get feedback, because you need to have that kind of natural type of articulation in the fingers especially, but to have all those degrees of freedom and have the information from that. The second is that the hand is robust to impacts. So one problem with multi-articulated prosthetics is their fragility. Users typically report damage, which often limits the hand functionality, such as a finger breaking. So even when you do get a realistic type of prosthetic, it can break or not be maintainable. And so this is the thing that they have here. This is a hand, an artificial hand. You have a vibration unit for touch feedback. You have a USB port. You have a power switch. So you have electronics on board that you have to be able to monitor. You have a water-resistant hand because you use your hand underwater sometimes or in the water. You have a Bluetooth-connected set of sensors that pick up different types of feedback. And you notice that the shape is in the shape of the hand. You have these flexible electronics underneath that take these signals and convert them into electrical signals, these mechanical signals, and they become electrical signals. And they make this out of carbon fiber technology, so it's durable. And so that's they're talking about here. They have some more points. A hand that can manipulate delicate objects and give touch feedback. A hand that is waterproof to enable easy washing and cleaning. Intuitive customization, calibration interfaces. And a hand that is reimbursable by insurance. So there are all these design principles that you have to conform to when you build something like this. So to wrap it up here, this is their website, Psionic, and there's the hand grabbing a raspberry.
Yeah. Now, I would personally call Bluetooth connectivity a bug, not a feature.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And doesn't surprise me about fingers. And again, some of the Giacomo Valle, I think, is anyway. ETH Zurich guy. He's now in Chicago, I believe. Anyway, he's got some papers. I can post these if this is a good topic to drop into Neurotech, because he's got a new paper like this week. So he was the one that first came to present Neurotech X Hack Night, where the foot, he just had a signal coming back from the foot and linked into the nerves. And what he showed was that having that the person can then walk across uneven ground at like a much greater speed than they could without that feedback.
Okay.
Which, and that like, was the, like, the real, I mean, and you know, I don't want to say easy, but like how low cost it was to add that.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you know, the hard part being, or not even like as a difficult surgery, but like it was low cost, and it was just like all you needed to do was have the surgeon then you know, add that to your peripheral nerve, and that feedback allowed you to, you know, basically control the foot in a way that was vastly superior. So I think that was his startup was like My Leg.
Okay.
And anyway, yeah, there's so you'll see on Neurotech X's Slack, I got some links, and these are really cool. I really want to check out the artificial vision pipeline, or you know, like there's some really, I mean, what they're doing there is also just interesting in terms of vision science,
Right,
and
yeah.
and like I'm curious about some things that would be really interesting to see their implementation. But,
Yeah, I think a lot of this, like, you know, we build these interfaces and then we can learn a lot of basic neuroscience too.
yeah,
Because
Yeah.
we're not, you know, this is not something you necessarily see in nature where you're restoring things with, you know, in different ways.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm curious, you know, in terms of like you're saying, like, you know, you can imagine there's a big difference of adding in that kind of visual prosthesis to for a child versus an adult, right? And you know, sort of like what Hussain and I were saying, like about dreaming. You know, in an adult, well, there's I know there's been some good, well, at least I was familiar with some of the vision people at Oxford who were doing this kind of work, and working with blind people to try and see what their visual cortex was being used for.
Yeah.
Right. And trying to design tasks for that. I'm blanking on her name now. I want to say Holly Wright. No. Anyway, I can look it up. But yeah, like what are the issues in terms of people learning to use these, you know, and like longitudinally following that in terms of how that improves, or you know, I would assume improves. And it somewhat relates to the meeting I had like 2 weeks ago with the brain, what they were calling BMI, brain machine interface. Excuse me, which is still the same as BCI, or I'm still not sure what the difference is. But in terms of, there is an adaptivity, that plasticity is something that they need to track so that they can get the same. In this case, it was a signal for swallowing, right? And that they worried about plasticity changing that brain response to the point where they cause the person to choke, or they cause the person to have a negative reaction, and you know, just again, that being a fascinating part of this you know, adaptive material that you're working with, which is the cortex.
Yeah, it's definitely, and you know, this happens with VR as well. We have these systems where, you know, you're not used to using them, so you have to be trained on them, or you're learning things. Sometimes you learn things that are intentional. Sometimes you learn things that are maybe unintentional, or you can teach people weird things that they wouldn't acquire on their own, like, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
As well as wondering, you know, whether, well, again, just the problems that people have in terms of headaches, in terms of sickness, in terms of things like that, where they're, you know, like to some degree, you know, the problem is that they're going back and forth.
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Not
yeah.
just immersing and staying. And again, it's just helpful when you've seen the goggles experiment, where you're just like, it takes a couple weeks before your brain starts to treat that as normal. There's definitely something to be said for tracking the VR sickness,
right,
and getting at what that's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. So I'm gonna stop here, and so this is the link to the Silica Labs in the chat. This is a paper. This is Human Machine Social Systems. An interesting paper on kind of talking about some of these technologies, generative AI bots, and some of the integrating those into social systems. So let me read the abstract. From fake accounts on social media and generative AI bots such as ChatGPT, to high-frequency trading algorithms on financial markets and self-driving vehicles, robots, bots, and algorithms are proliferating and permeating our communication channels, social interactions, economic transactions, and transportation arteries. Networks of multiple interdependent interacting humans and autonomous machines constitute complex adaptive social systems where the collective outcomes cannot simply be reduced from either human or machine behavior alone. Under this paradigm, we review recent experimental, theoretical, and observational research across a range of disciplines. So they look at robotics, human-computer interaction, what they call web science, which I guess is like the science of the web, complexity science, computational social science, finance, economics, political science, social psych, and sociology. So that's a lot of areas. Basically, they're trying to build a theory of like a sociology maybe of human-machine interaction. So we have, like, when we talk about human-computer interaction or human-machine interaction, a lot of the focus is often on like the psychology of it. And so this is sort of the sociology of it. We identify general dynamics and patterns and situations of competition, coordination, cooperation, contagion, and collective decision making. So this is like these different modes of interaction and sort of the thing. So you might have competition or contagion, which is where ideas spread, cooperation, where you get working together, and collective decision making. So this is a social thing, but also it involves technology and contextualizes them in four prominent existing human machine communities. So they take all of these different sort of dynamics and patterns, and then they apply it to four case studies. So the first is high frequency trading markets. The second is the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, the open collaboration encyclopedia Wikipedia, and the news aggregation and community discussion community Reddit. So Reddit, Wikipedia, Twitter, and high frequency trading. So those are your four domains. We conclude with suggestions for the research, design, and governance of human-machine social systems, which are necessary to reduce misinformation, prevent financial crashes, improve road safety, overcome labor market disruptions, enable a better human future. So this is an interesting paper. This is, it has implications for policy, sociology, and of course, human-machine interaction. The other paper I was going to talk, this is called Cybernetics in Chile. So we've been talking about the cyberneticists, the early cyberneticists, and we've gotten to Maturana and Varela. And so Maturana is a cyberneticist who worked in the biological computer lab of Heinz von Forester. And actually, this is an interesting article that kind of links what was going on at the biological computer laboratory with Chilean cybernetics, which was apparently a community of people. Of course, Chile is the place where they built CyberSyn, which was the sort of the command and control center for like social engineering. So they built this control center, that would allow them to monitor all these different things about going on in society, economic indicators, agricultural productivity, industrial productivity, and manage them. And so that was the hope. And that was sort of the apex of Chilean cybernetics. So it's a very interesting community of cyberneticians, but also this link to the biological computer laboratory. So this is, this is in the journal AI and Society. So this is a relatively new journal. So if you're interested, this is Juan Carlos Letelier. And so the abstract reads, during the 60s, most curious symbiosis took hold between Heinz von Forester, then the director of a top-notch and lavishly funded U.S. lab, biological computer lab, and the Chilean neuroscientist Humberto Maturana, a professor at the University of Chile. The chance encounter between them triggered a long-lasting friendship and a fundamental change in our understanding of systems science. In particular, the contributions of Biology and Cognition, which is the book we're reading now, and Autopoiesis, which is the book. We also have that book in the channel, and we might turn to that book after Biology of Cognition, are important to understand this change in the years 1968 to 1973. Those years are particularly relevant because there was a lot of social change going on in Chile that have direct consequences on the sort of the flavor of cybernetics that we look at here. In this period, Maturana published as a technical report of the BCL, the foundational document Neurophysiology of Cognition. Later in 1973, the book De Máquinas y Seres Vivos put forward the notion of autopoietic systems. So there was a book in Spanish that talks about sort of this first notion of autopoietic systems, which is, of course, the thing that Maturana and Varela developed further in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And so this is sort of the origins of this, their view on systems theory. Also, between 1971 and 1973, the Allende government tried to cyberneticize the Chilean economy with the CINCO project, which was the roots of CyberSyn. And in that project, Maturana and von Forester played a role in teaching cybernetics to the engineers and administrators of this technological dream. During the same time, cybernetics was important in Chile, and professors Maturana and von Forester, although not directly involved in the day-to-day running of CINCO, were important in that unique effort. When the military coup deposed Allende and sent Chile into a tailspin of right-wing retribution, von Forester, a foreigner who loved Chile and its people, did his utmost to ensure the safety of the many people involved in Latin American cybernetics. So this is von Forester interacting with people in Chile, interacting with that whole community of cyberneticists and the history of that. So I thought that was very interesting for cognition futures people or cybernetics people. And we should follow up on some of that in the group.
Yeah, really interesting.
Okay. So that's great. It looks like Amanda had to leave, and
I see from the Wikipedia, CyberSyn Wikipedia, principal architect of the system was British operations research scientist Stafford Beer.
Right. Stafford Beer was the person who designed that because he's the organizational scientist in the cybernetics community at the time. He was like, there are a lot of books by Stafford Beer too that are very interesting with respect to large scale systems. So I actually talk about this in my project management course, where we consider really large scale system or project management and kind of whether it's possible or not to do that in a sustainable way. Because a lot of the problems with large scale, and we know this from like the recent explosion in AI systems, is that, can you manage large scale social systems with maybe artificial intelligence or systems methods? And is that possible? Because there's so many things going on in societies. There's so much flux in what's going on. And
But that was also the who's the geodesic?
Buckminster Fuller.
Buckminster Fuller, like we could, if we had the right information, we have enough resources. We just need to work on the distribution and control of those. And somebody else at that time, I think this is really interesting. But then it was a different set of Chicago people who came in with Pinochet.
Yeah, the University of Chicago Economics Department is notorious. For like doing a lot of things. Yeah, but so it was Biological Cybernetics Laboratory, and Von Forrester. He was sort of the basis for a lot of interesting ideas, and this is one of the things that he championed in his career.
Sure. Well, and I think in the reading group there was a Stafford Beer paper, wasn't there?
There may have been. I don't think we've talked about him a lot, but he's definitely got some interest. Like, I don't know, there are a couple of books that we could go over. There might be some papers, but definitely he's involved in the sort of surreptitiously in the Evergood regulator theorem development, because he's a big name at the time, and so that work as well. But so I think that's.
Well, it's interesting, and again, I'm just coming on the back of this D3 meeting, but it's under enabling technologies, right? Like operations research, and logistic. I mean, I was thinking about it's super tough. I mean, sorry, I'm also coming on the back of like an Army War College lecture on our history in the Middle East, which is just pretty brutal. But operations research and like where that is now, and what they what has come out of that discipline is interesting, especially when you think about the work on planning in reinforcement learning that relates to the saffron call. Right. And just to say a few, I mean, we should definitely have another meeting, or it'd be great to have a meeting in the short term on the saffron call, and I need to spend some time with your draft. But I did get into some of Saffron's papers, and again, like it's really interesting to see. One, he is trying to bring in active inference, and again, highly recommend the Ryan Smith for that as like it relates to computational implementation. But he also brings in some interesting work that I know from basically modeling drugs and harmonic analysis of the connectome, and it's funny because it's like he seems to be somewhat using that in the way that that optical systems are used for controlling qubits.
Okay.
So you are setting up, I mean, basically how optical tweezers work. And so there's certain like because Saffron kind of connects brain imaging together with some of this modeling, right? That he's kind of straddling both. He cites a lot of Celine Adesoy's work and Morton Kringelbach's that is really interesting from coming from a brain imaging standpoint. But I see now the Bengio stuff, the G-Flow net is really more kind of, I mean, it's very flexible, but it seems like an alternate to the kind of variational Bayesian approach.
Yeah.
Like it's just a different way to compute that. It's like a kind of cool one-shot MCMC. You know, again, in like super broad strokes. And so I've been, like, at this point just kind of focused in on the Saffron papers, but all the other papers are really focused on planning and reinforcement learning. And yeah, it's interesting to think about that in terms of operations research.
Yeah, that's great. So before we go, does anyone else have anything else they'd like to say? Jesse put a few things in the chat about the, we wanted to talk about the internships, and we have some news there. We can talk about that next time, or during the week. And he liked that paper. And he said, "Would you like me to head a Friday or just on Friday?" We could meet on Friday if we wanted. I don't think we have.
What's the date?
Oh, March 1st. So I think we'll get
Okay.
there.
Well,
I think
I mean,
we've got
submit.
the abstract in hand. I think we can submit that, but we can also talk about some administrative stuff too. Hussein, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, yeah. Thanks again, guys. And Jesse had introduced me to. Jesse has suggested for me to get a general abstract for the embodied intelligence workshop too.
Yeah.
And yeah, that definitely seems doable. Just a short presentation, 10 to 15 minutes on some topics related to VR. That definitely would be fine. So yeah, I can think of, this is a bit short notice because it's due in a week, but I'll see if I can get something together. So.
Okay. And then is it the new is it the Columbia?
Oh, New Reality, yeah.
New Reality hackathon?
New Reality. Let me I'll just drop the link again. Yeah.
Next weekend?
That is March 8th.
Oh, 8th. Okay, 2 weeks.
I don't know how to pronounce. Okay, Neuroscience, NEU.
Right.
But they put NEU in front of reality. So how do you say that? Like new reality?
Yeah.
Yeah.
New reality?
They should add a sound file.
Yeah. There's so many people doing these kind of portmanteaus that they have to there's neuro reality, there's neuro reality.
Why don't they just put neuro, like neuro reality?
Oh, I'm glad
someone's probably already taken it. That's the point. It's
okay.
Vrushali saw something on Neurostars, a VR project.
Oh yeah, so yeah, we're doing the VR project again, and I'm putting up the descriptions for the GSOC projects, and I'm being flexible. I'm not looking to repeat the same projects, but I do want, like we did last summer, we had Vrushali, we did some work on some assets, and we have we'd like to advance some of that, or maybe do some new things. So it's really up to the person who wants to propose something. They might look at those resources and say I can improve upon them, or build an application for, say, like a headset, or build some new assets and maybe integrate them with what we have. So I mean, it's really gonna let people have the freedom to choose what they want to do. Just I encourage people, if you want to apply for the projects, to talk to me beforehand, and we can discuss whether this is a good way to go. So we could, we don't have, we want to plan out what we want to do over the summer, but we also don't want to repeat work that's been done. We're basically trying to just improve that same project. So we're trying to add things to it, whatever. So, and yes, for Vrushali, you could apply again if you'd like. We'll be doing, we'll be having a similar thing to last summer, where we have a working group, and we have, and hopefully, we'll have, we'll get our choice of students. Sometimes we don't, but it's really up to our sponsors. So, but I would apply and see what happens. So. Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, well, that's it for today. Thank you for attending, and have a good week. See you around in Slack and on Discord.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.